Alex Pretti, Renee Good, Geraldo Campos, Silverio Gonzalez. These are just a few of the names of the innocent people who have been killed by the Department of Homeland Security, either by ICE or by the Customs and Border Patrol, CBP. They did not need to die. They were brutally murdered by our federal government. I know some of you may be feeling frozen, petrified, overwhelmed, not know what to do. The first thing you need to do is reach out to other people who are understanding and supportive, and get where you're coming from. Have a feeling of solidarity and connection with just one person at first. Take care of yourself. We have an action item today that will help you feel a little bit better. Do what you need to do to stabilize yourself emotionally. And when you're ready, I really recommend connecting with other people to take some action, even if it's really small. It all adds up. It's all significant. It will make you feel better, and it's important. You are needed. You are needed in this historical moment to do just a little bit. So that could be joining a mutual aid group. That could be registering people to vote for the 2026 midterm elections. That could be going out and joining a patrol if you're up for that. That would be awesome, but there's so much else that needs to be done. You can send supplies to the people of Minneapolis. You can donate time or resources, but don't just sit with these feelings. Express them somehow politically with others in community. And not only will help you feel better, but it's really needed right now in this moment. Today's episode, we will mourn the victims of ICE and the Department of Homeland Security. We will also put it within a larger context of what this brutal, oppressive regime is trying to do globally. But in that, we will also acknowledge and see the resistance that's forming, that's continuing to form, the people who are standing up, the hopeful activism that's taking place, the bravery and the courage of the good people of Minneapolis and Chicago and Maine and all over this country. Standing up to authoritarianism here and globally. We'll look at the international effort as well to stop this oppressive regime. I'm not going to lie, this is a difficult subject. I've been putting off doing this. I haven't felt up to it. I've been feeling so down and depressed about everything that's happening. I think you can relate to that. So we will sit with this a little bit, but we will then also move towards hope and look for the good and what's coming out of this horrible, horrible situation that we find ourselves. And I have a story today that I think really fits with what's going on. It's a fairy tale. It's a Brothers Grimm story. So it's weird. It's shocking, but I think it really fits with what we're going through. And then I have an action item, and the action item doesn't have to do with politics, but it's scientifically proven to be restorative. So I will share that at the end as well. Today on Resilience in Dark Times, courage. You're listening to Resilience in Dark Times. I'm your companion and guide, Michael Glavin. Whatever brought you here, I'm glad you found us. This is a space for honest conversation, practical strategies, and the kind of hope that comes from facing reality together. Let's dive in. Hello and welcome. Today's episode was supposed to be on resilience essentials. I was going to do sort of a best of the last 16 episodes and take out the core things that you need to be resilient. But frankly, I have not been up for doing that episode. When it was time to do the episode, I was not feeling resilient. I was having trouble sleeping. I was having symptoms of anxiety, having trouble breathing at times, and sort of racing thoughts, and feeling depressed and anxious and overwhelmed, and certainly not up for doing a podcast on resilience. I felt like it was, the sweet irony. And you might be thinking, well, Michael, you're doing a podcast on resilience. Like, shouldn't you be really resilient? And no, some people are sort of like a volleyball that you push them down under the water and then they go popping back up, right? You just can't keep them down. They're just so vibrant and resilient. And that's not me. I am more like a Nerf ball, right? And so at first I can float on the surface because haven't had any water. But then when you push me under the water and give me a squeeze, I can really take on the water. And so I might stay underwater for a while. I'll eventually come back to the surface, but I don't just bounce right back. And that's sort of why I'm doing this podcast on resilience, is because I need resilience. I need to figure it out. I need to learn about resilience, to think about when I've been resilient and when I haven't, what I've done, what other people have done, what the research says, what stories and fictions say, in order to help myself, and in so doing, help you and try to be a service to you, because you're probably not that volleyball just bounces right back, because those people aren't listening to the podcast. They don't need this podcast. But I think you're like me, and we need help. We need to learn how to be resilient, and that maybe resilience doesn't come as naturally to us. So it's something we need to focus on in order to become resilient, to be resilient, to let our natural resilience come to the surface. So today I'm not going to do an episode on resilience essentials. I'm going to talk about the last couple of weeks and what I've been going through. And I imagine you've been going through something similar, because the last few weeks have been very intense politically here in the United States. A couple of weeks ago, I noticed I was having all these symptoms, and I asked myself, well, when did these symptoms start? When did I start feeling these terrible feelings physically and having trouble sleeping and having dreams? And then I traced it back to the killing, the murder of Renee Good. I went against all my advice to myself and to you to not watch videos and do that to your nervous system. But I really wanted to know what happened, because I heard someone was shot and killed, and the administration was saying terrible, terrible things about this person. And so I wanted to know the truth. I was like, is the Trump administration lying about this? They've lied about so many things. They almost constantly lie. And so I wanted to see for myself. So I watched the initial video that came out, which was upsetting. And then I think the next day, the administration released body camera footage from one of the ICE officers involved. And that was even worse. You got to see what a sweet person this Renee Good was, how she was like chipper. And she's, saying to the ICE officer who kills her, "I'm not mad at you." And she's Minnesota nice, like a little passive aggressive. That's Minnesota nice, but totally sweet and endearing. And her wife is a little more surly, but nothing too out of line. I mean, they're dealing with an occupying secret police force that's violating people's constitutional rights all the time and breaking the law. So it's okay to be a little surly with them, I think. And, and I also watched the Times recreation. They took different videos and put them together in a timeline. And what I saw was, what I witnessed was an ICE agent stood in front of their vehicle, and ICE agents are like police forces, are trained to not stand directly in front of or behind a vehicle. So the ICE agent stood in front of the vehicle, putting himself in danger. And then she turned the wheel to move out away from him, to leave the scene, which she's totally okay to do. It's totally within her rights. And then the ICE officer moved to the side of the car and shot her 3 times, once in the face. And it's horrifying. It is horrifying what they did. And to me, that's murder. After the agent shot and killed her, he called her an effing B word, and then he fled the scene. I imagine he fled the scene because he knew he just committed murder. Maybe it's murder, maybe it's manslaughter, I'm not sure. But it is not right. It is horrible. I think of the trauma of her wife, who's in the car with her, and what she'll have to live with the rest of her life. I think of her 3 daughters and what their lives will be like without growing up with their mom. And my heart goes out to Renee Good's wife and her children and Renee Good's family. She did not deserve this. And so, in witnessing her killing was traumatic for me. It was, witnessing the killing of an innocent, beautiful person who was out there trying to protect others. Someone who is a rapid responder, like I'm a rapid responder, like many of the people I know are rapid responders, out there observing with orange whistles, trying to make sure that ICE stays within the bounds of what is legal for them, although they repeatedly do not do that. Our hope is that by witnessing them and filming them, that they will be less brutal and follow the law a little bit more. So I realized I was experiencing for that week sort of the vicarious trauma of what I'd witnessed and the horror of that, and also the horror of what happened. And what made it worse was the administration's response to the killing was to blame the victim, to call her all sorts of terrible things, and to call her a terrorist, and to block the investigation by the local authorities into the killing of Renee Good, and later to block there was a civil rights investigation by an FBI agent into the violation of Renee Good's civil rights, and that investigation was blocked. And instead, they started investigating Renee Good and Renee Good's wife to try to come up with some criminal charges against them. It's outrageous, it's disgusting, it's horrible, and it's what authoritarian regimes do. And then the response by the current regime was not, this is terrible, this is awful, let's investigate, let's figure out what happened, let's go over our training, because obviously we don't want this to happen again. There was none of that. It was demonizing the person who was killed and claiming federal immunity. There's no such thing. Federal agents break the law, they are liable. They can be arrested and charged and convicted for breaking the law. There is no federal immunity. But that told me, that's a signal, and it should be chilling to everyone listening, that this federal government, that Trump's regime, thinks that they can kill U.S. citizens with impunity, that there will be no investigation, that there will be no punishment, no one will be held responsible as long as Trump is in power. That is the new reality that we're living with. I do think it's significant that the victim was white. The Trump administration is signaling that they will kill anyone. They will kill even a white woman who's a mother of 3 if you stand in their way. That's what they are asserting. That's the America they want. One in which they can kill with impunity. They can kill anyone with impunity. That's what they want. That's what is at stake here. The bottom has dropped out. No one is safe. And this is in the context of larger things that were happening. This is a microcosm at home domestically of what the Trump regime is doing geopolitically. So in this time, the Trump administration kidnapped a foreign head of state. They kidnapped him. This is after they killed over 100 Venezuelan fishermen, just blew up their boats and killed the survivors. And it turns out that one of those attacks was done from a military vehicle that was painted to look like a civilian aircraft. That is a war crime. They're killing fishermen in violation of international law. They're committing war crimes. And after the head of Venezuela was kidnapped, Trump went on to threaten the leaders of Mexico, Colombia, Cuba, and continues to threaten Canada, and then went on to threaten Greenland with annexation, a hostile takeover of Greenland, a hostile takeover of Canada. This is at the same time with the Department of Justice raiding reporters' homes, confiscating their electronic devices, trying to find sources to prosecute. We have the weaponization of the Department of Justice to go after Trump's political opponents. We also have the murder of someone in ICE detention by strangulation and a cover-up in Texas. The two witnesses, they're trying to deport the two witnesses. And just this morning, right before I was going to do this podcast, I saw that ICE killed another person in Minneapolis. I saw the video, 6 ICE agents on top of him, beating him, and then the shots rang out and multiple agents fired multiple rounds into this person who died. 37-year-old white person with no criminal record, U.S. citizen, killed another one. So I think you're aware of most of this, and so maybe you're with me in terms of how bad it's been and how dark it's gotten and how scary the future looks if Trump's power goes unchecked. And so far, for the most part, the Democrats have been capitulating, rolling over, cutting deals, appeasement. There is no appeasement for a bully, for an authoritarian. That just makes you look weak, and they take more and more and more. But I'm happy to say what has pulled me out of my darkness, my despair, my oh dear, my depression, was the response by the people of Minneapolis. After the shooting of Renee Good, the rapid response organizations, disparate and decentralized. Apparently before the shooting, they would get tens of requests a day to join up and to get a whistle and go out there and watch ICE and make sure they stay within legal and constitutional bounds. But after the shooting, hundreds of people called in to volunteer. More and more people got out onto the streets. More and more people went out to witness what was going on, risking their lives. Now, like after the shooting, it's very different. It's very different to go out and videotape ICE and to blow a whistle anywhere near ICE. These brave people put their lives on the line willingly, consciously, to protect all of our freedoms. The only freedom you have, the only rights you have are those you're willing to die for. I hate to say it. I wish I didn't have to say that, but it's true. When there's an authoritarian in power who's willing to kill, they will take everything away from you until you're willing to stand up and say no. And the people of Minneapolis stood up and they said no. Just yesterday, 15,000 people in the streets in negative 10-degree weather. And they called for, and they successfully pulled off a general strike. Hundreds of businesses shut down. No business yesterday. No profit going up the ladder. No taxes going to the federal government on that day. That's bravery. That's bravery. People going out there. People putting their bodies on the line to say no. And of course, the Trump administration did not pull out ICE. They did not back down. ICE is still there, and they killed again. ICE are killers. That's what they do. The only way to stop them is to stand up and say no collectively, non-violently. And it's not just the brave, brave people of Minneapolis. It's also finally the EU. Finally, the EU stood up to Trump. Trump wanted Greenland. He said, I'm going to get Greenland. It's going to be a territory of the U.S. Coming in 2026, Greenland, property of the U.S. And what did the EU say? Trump threatened military action. Oh, I'm not ruling it out. And he threatened tariffs. And what happened? People in Europe sold off U.S. stocks and bonds, and the stock market dropped significantly. People in the EU started to talk about retaliatory tariffs. I listened to an interview with someone who was talking about if countries in Europe and the individual investors, more importantly, private investors in Europe, sold off their U.S. assets, it would destroy the U.S. dollar. We would have inflation like you didn't see since the 30s in Germany. It would take down the banking system. The stock market would crash. They could wreck our economy if they wanted to. The only thing Trump understands is power. You have to meet power with power. In this case, economic power. The EU and Carney from Canada gave a great speech, and they stood up to Trump. And what happened? Trump totally backed down. He declared victory, of course. He said, oh, yes, we have a conception of a vague possibility of something in my mind, kind of a plan for Greenland, and we got everything we wanted. He did not. He lost. He lost big time. He was humiliated. He was laughed at. But I'm glad he spoke the way he did, insulting everyone in the EU, because he exposed himself. It was just like the speech we talked about when he talked to the generals, and he just embarrassed himself. He did the same thing in Davos, where he exposed himself as a blustering fool, and once you stand up against him, he will back down. Power only understands power. I'm reminded of Hegel and the master-slave dialectic. I was going to read that. I thought, oh yeah, I'll just read that. It's a few pages and that'll be the story for the episode. And I went back and started rereading it. I was like, oh my goodness, it is so dense. It's brilliant. It's mostly brilliant because it's the origin of this notion of intersubjectivity. The shift from consciousness to self-consciousness involves needing another consciousness, another awareness. And it's about mutual recognition and doubling and all sorts of really amazing things. And Jessica Benjamin pulls a lot from that passage and her work Bonds of Love. So I recommend that. But it's not just about consciousness, the passage. It's also about power. The essence of the master-slave dialectic in Hegel is he says that two consciousnesses meet. And then they have this struggle. And it's a struggle unto death. And the one consciousness who risks their life becomes the master. And the one who values life becomes the slave. And that's chilling. And I think it shows a lot about sort of the Western imperialist colonial mindset. And there's a certain amount of truth to that, I think, unfortunately. That Trump is willing to go to any end to get what he wants. And so if you capitulate, you're going to be subservient to him. You're going to lose everything to him. You're going to be used by him. You're going to be a tool of him. And the only way that we have our freedom, the only way we have our rights is if we're willing to die for them. I hate to say it. I wish I didn't have to say it. But that's the unvarnished truth. The rights you have are the ones you're willing to die for. There's an Episcopalian bishop who talked to his clergymen, and he told them to get their affairs in order, to have their wills written. And he says, quote, because it may be that now is no longer the time for statements, but for us with our bodies to stand between the powers of this world and the most vulnerable. And that's exactly what clergymen of whatever religion should be doing right now, is putting their bodies in between ICE and the most vulnerable. All of us have a responsibility to protect the most vulnerable. Now is the time to decide what kind of society we want to live in. And if we all come together and we all take collective action and all nonviolently resist, we will get through this. If we stand with the good, brave people of Minneapolis and the good, brave people of Chicago and Maine and all the other cities that are targets of this oppressive regime, we will get through this with solidarity, with collective action, with mutual aid. This is a time for courage. If you do nothing, it will not buy you safety. It will buy you more and more and more danger, less and less freedom. You have nothing to lose. It's already lost if you do nothing. We are never going to be stronger than we are right now. Right now, we have the people, we have the majority. They haven't built the mass detention centers yet. In an interview, they asked Trump, if he was constrained by international law, and he said no. And they asked him, well, what are the constraints on your power? And he said the only constraints on his power were his own sense of morality and his own mind. That should scare everyone. He didn't say international law. He didn't say the Constitution. He didn't say Congress. He didn't say treaties. He didn't say regulations and international agreements. He said his own mind. That's the only thing constraining his power, which means there are no constraints on his power, according to him. That's why it's so important for people to stand up to him and show him the limits of his power, to show him that we are strong, that there is someone else out there who matters, which is all of us. That's why it's so important to push back and hit him economically. That's the only thing he recognizes. That's the only thing that will make him stop. And we saw as soon as he's sort of popped in the nose, he backs down. He'll declare victory. He'll say, I wanted to be hit in the nose. That was my plan all along. I got every punch in the nose I wanted. But that we all know that he's just, again, lying. He's making things up. He's trying to make the best of a situation because he's weak. He's a coward. When you stand up to bullies, they back down. They are cowards. He is a small, weak, pathetic man. He is weak. We are strong. I turned on the TV yesterday, reports of the general strike. I saw my friend and comrade Kieran from Minneapolis spoke eloquently about the general strike and the need for the strike and the purpose of the strike and how successful it was and the power of working people. And he is right on. We have the power. And if we organize, we come together, we can use this power to create a more democratic, a more egalitarian, a more ecological, and a more free society than we have right now. The general strike was significant. We need economic levers, not just symbolic protests. If that general strike in Minneapolis can spread to a nationwide general strike eventually, to a week-long, a month-long general strike, to a tax strike, the federal government cannot run if people delay their taxes for 6 months. We have power. We make this country go. We have far more power than we realize. If we can all come together, it doesn't even have to be all of us to be real, right? There's that crazy MAGA uncle that's not going to come around. To heck with them. We don't need them. But everybody else, we're the majority. We're the vast majority. And if we take action together, we can stop this now. We can shut down ICE. We can get rid of Trump. We can get rid of this authoritarian administration. We can do this. The tide is turning. People are fighting back. And the more people fight back and the more we win, the more people are going to say, oh, he's not so scary. We can do this too. We'll join you. But someone has to lead the way. And that's you and that's me. Another thing that helped me get out of my fear and anxiety was to pick up my orange whistle and get out there and do an ICE patrol again with my community. Even though it's dangerous, even though I'm risking my life. It's important. I can't live out of fear. I can't. Courage is from the French Curr, which means heart. So courage is a heart-based action. It's love-based action. I think about Renee Good. I think about the 5-year-old who was used by ICE as bait, who was taken by them, abducted by them. They also took a 2-year-old toddler. My love for my fellow human beings compels me to say no, to get out there, to say stop, to blow my whistle, to stand with my neighbors. Because we all know where this goes if we don't do anything. They're building the concentration camps. They're building the internment camps, whatever you want to call them. There's a study done in Stanford, the prison experiments. You can look it up. Very famous study. Supposed to go for 2 weeks. They took regular college students and divided them half into guards, half into prisoners. And they just wanted to see what would happen, like an individual ethics and morality versus sort of groupthink. And they had to stop the experiment after 6 days because the guards were abusing the prisoners so much that they had to stop it. They were afraid for psychological damage to the people who were the prisoners. And if you look at the pictures that came out of Abu Ghraib, where the American soldiers are torturing and abusing the prisoners there, I will never forget the images of these young soldiers smiling and giving different hand gestures as they're sexually abusing and torturing these people. And that's what happens when you give a certain group of people power over someone else, and then you tell them that they can act with impunity, that they have federal immunity, and then you put them in charge of detention centers, and you bar Congress people from investigating those detention centers. And when you hear reports coming out of those detention centers that people are sleeping stacked on top of each other, that their lights are on 24 hours a day, which is a form of torture, that they're in cold conditions without blankets. And these are not people who are accused of anything. They're not guilty of anything. They're just people. They're just people in detention, and they're being abused, and they're dying, and they're not giving medical attention, and they're not giving access to lawyers. And this is only going to get worse unless it's stopped. We know where this goes. It must be stopped. We need to take collective, nonviolent action now. This is our best chance. A year from now, 2 years from now, we're going to be weaker. Courage. It's going to take courage. But again, we have nothing to lose. If we do nothing, fast forward to the future, we've lost everything. This is our best chance through action to change course, to do something else. So are you with me? I hope so. This is as much of a pep talk for myself as it is for you. I'm in it with you. I know it's scary. I know I'd rather turn away. I'd rather not listen to the news. I'd rather live my life, but I can't. I can't ignore this. This is too important. This is too big. This is about our future. This is about my kids' future. We need to do something. And the general strike in Minneapolis was a big step in that direction. So we just need to keep going. Keep going. We can do this. We will get through this together. My story for today, let's read the story and then I have an action item. The action item, I think you'll like it. It's non-political, but it's proven to be restorative of hope and vitality. It's from the New York Times, so we'll get to that. The story is a little bit longer this time, but it's really relevant, and it's bizarre. It's a fairy tale. It's a grim fairy tale. And so I'll be reading it and you'll be like, yep, this is the grim fairy tale. All right. But I think it's totally worth it and it's kind of fun. So here we go. The story for this episode is called Maiden Without Hands. A miller who had gradually become very poor had nothing left but his mill and a large apple tree behind it. One day, when he went into the forest to gather wood, an old man whom he had never seen before came toward him and said, "Why do you take the trouble to cut down wood? I will give you great riches if you will promise to let me have what stands behind the mill." "I possess nothing else." So he said to the old man, "Yes, I will let you have it." Then the stranger smiled maliciously and said, "In 3 years I will come again to claim what belongs to me." And after saying that, he departed. As soon as the miller returned home, his wife came toward him and said, "Miller, from whence have all these riches come so suddenly to our house? All at once every drawer and chest has become full of gold. No one brought it here, and I know not where it came from." "Oh," replied the husband, "I know all about it. A strange man whom I met in the wood promised me great treasures if I would hand over to him what stood behind the mill. I knew I had nothing there but the large apple tree, so I gave him my promise. "Oh, husband," said the wife in alarm, "that must have been the wizard. He did not mean the apple tree, but our daughter, who was behind the mill sweeping out the court." The miller's daughter was a modest and beautiful maiden, and lived in innocence and obedience to her parents for 3 years, until the day came on which the wicked wizard was to claim her. She knew he was coming, and after washing till she was pure and clean as snow, she drew a circle of white chalk and stood within it. The wizard made his appearance very early, but he did not dare to venture over the white circle. Therefore he could not get near her. In great anger he said to the miller, "Take away every drop of water, that she may not wash, otherwise I shall have no power over her." The frightened miller did as he desired, but on the next morning, when the wizard came again, her hands were as pure and clean as ever, for she had wept over them. On this account, the wizard was still unable to approach her. So he flew into rage and said, "Chop her hands off, otherwise I cannot touch her." Then the miller was terrified and exclaimed, "How can I cut off the hands of my own child?" Then the wicked wizard threatened him and said, "If you will not do as I desire you, then I can claim you instead of your daughter and will carry you off." The father listened in agony and in his fright promised to obey. He went to his daughter and said to her, "Oh, my child, unless I cut off your hands, the wizard will take me away with him, and in my anguish I have promised. Help me in my trouble and forgive me for the wicked deed I have promised to do." "Dear father," she replied, "do with me what you will. I am your child." Thereupon she placed her 2 hands on the table before him, and he cut them off. The wizard came the next day for the 3rd time, but the poor girl had wept so bitterly over the stumps of her arms that they were as clean and white as ever. Then he was obliged to give way, for he had lost all right to the maiden. As soon as the wizard had departed, the miller said, "My child, I have obtained so much good through your conduct that for your whole lifetime I shall hold you most precious and dear." "But I cannot stay here, father," she replied. "I am not safe. Let me go away with people who will give me the sympathy I need so much." "I fear such people are very seldom to be found in the world," said the father. However, he let her go. So she tied up her maiden arms and went forth on her way at sunrise. For a whole day she traveled without food, and as night came on, found herself near one of the royal gardens. By the light of the moon, she could see many trees laden with beautiful fruit, but she could not reach them, because the place was surrounded by a moat full of water. She had been without a morsel to eat the whole day, and her hunger was so great that she could not help but crying out, "Oh, if I were only able to get some of that delicious fruit! I shall die unless I can obtain something to eat very soon." She knelt down and prayed for help, and while she prayed, a guardian fairy appeared and made a channel in the water so that she was able to pass through on dry ground. When she entered the garden, the fairy was with her, although she did not know it. So she walked to a tree full of beautiful pears, not knowing that they had been counted. Being unable to pluck any without hands, she went quite close to the tree and ate one with her mouth as it hung. One and no more, just to stay her hunger. The gardener, who saw her with the fairy standing near her, thought it was a spirit, and was too frightened to move or to speak. After having satisfied her hunger, the maiden went and laid herself down among the shrubs and slept in peace. On the following morning, the king, to whom the garden belonged, came out to look at his fruit trees, and when he reached the pear tree and counted the pears, he found one missing. At first he thought it had fallen, but it was not under the tree. So he went to the gardener and asked what had become of it. Then said the gardener, "There was a ghost in the garden last night who had no hands and ate the pear off the tree with its mouth." "How could the ghost get across the water?" asked the king. "And what became of it after eating the pear?" To this the gardener replied, Someone came first in snow-white robes from heaven, who made a channel and stopped the flow of the water, so that the ghost would walk through on dry ground. They must have been an angel," continued the gardener, "and therefore I was afraid to ask questions or to call out, as soon as the spectre had eaten one pear and went away." Then said the king, "Conceal from everyone what you have told me, and I will watch myself tonight." As soon as it was dark, the king came into the garden and brought a priest with him to address the ghost, and they both seated themselves under a tree, with the gardener standing near them, and waited in silence. About midnight the maiden crept out from the bushes and went to the pear tree, and the three watchers saw her eat a pear from the tree without picking it, while an angel stood near in white garments. Then the priest went toward her and said, "Art thou come from heaven or earth? Art thou a spirit or a human being?" Then the maiden answered, "Ah, me! I am no ghost, only a poor creature forsaken by everyone but God." Then the king said, "You may be forsaken by all the world, but if you will let me be your friend, I will never forsake you." So the maiden was taken to the king's castle, and she was so beautiful and modest that the king learned to love her with all his heart. He had silver hands made for her, and very soon after they were married with great pomp. About a year after, the king had to go to battle, and he placed his young wife under the care of his mother, who promised to be very kind to her and to write to him. Not long after this, the queen had a little son born, and the king's mother wrote a letter to him immediately, so that he might have the earliest intelligence and sent it by messenger. The messenger, however, after traveling a long way, became tired and sat down to rest by a brook, where he soon fell asleep. Then came the wizard, who was always trying to injure the good queen, took away the letter from the sleeping messenger and replaced it with another, in which it was stated that the little child was a changeling. Knowing nothing of the change, the messenger carried the letter to the king, whom, when he read it, was terribly distressed and troubled. However, he wrote in reply to say that the queen was to have every attention and care till his return. The wicked wizard again watched for the messenger, and while he slept exchanged the king's kind letter for another, in which was written to the king's mother in order to kill both the queen and her child. The old mother was quite terrified when she read this letter, for she could not believe the king meant to do anything so dreadful. She wrote again to the king, but there was no answer, for the wicked wizard always interrupted the messengers and sent false letters. The last was worse than all, for it stated that instead of killing the mother and her child, they were to cut out the tongue of the changeling and put out the mother's eyes. But the king's mother was too good to attend to these dreadful orders. So she said to the queen, while her eyes streamed with tears, "I cannot kill you both, as the king desires me to do, but I must not let you remain here any longer. Go now out into the world with your child, and do not come here again." Then she bound the boy on his mother's back, and the poor woman departed, weeping as she went. After walking some time, she reached a dense forest, and knew not which road to take. So she knelt down and prayed for help. As she rose from her knees, she saw a light shining from a window of a little cottage, on which was hung a small signboard with these words, "Everyone who dwells here is safe." Out of the cottage stepped a maiden dressed in snowy garments, and said, "Welcome, queen wife," and led her in. Then she unfastened the baby from his mother's back and hushed him in her arms till he slept so peacefully that she laid him on a bed in another room and came back to his mother. The poor woman looked at her earnestly and said, "How did you know I was a queen?" The white maiden replied, "I am a good fairy sent to take care of you and your child." So she remained in that cottage many years and was very happy, and so pious and good that her hands, which had been cut off, were allowed to grow again, and the little boy became her great comfort. Not long after she had been sent away from the castle, the king returned and immediately asked to see his wife and child. Then his mother began to weep and said, "You wicked man, how could you ask for me for your wife and child when you wrote me such dreadful letters and told me to kill two such innocent beings?" The king, in distress, asked her what she meant, and she showed him the letters she had received, which were changed by the dreadful wizard. Then the king began to weep so bitterly for his wife and child that the old woman pitied him and said, "Do not be so unhappy. They still live. I could not kill them, but your wife and child are gone into the wide world, never to come back for fear of your anger." Then said the king, "I will go to the ends of the earth to find them. I will neither eat nor drink till I find my dear wife, even if I should die of hunger." Thereupon, the king started an expedition, traveling over rocks and valleys, over mountains and highways, for 7 long years. But he found her not, and he thought that she was starved to death, and that he should never see her again. He neither ate nor drank during the whole time of earthly food, but heaven sent him help. At last he arrived at a large forest and found the little cottage with the signboard and the words upon it, "Everyone who dwells here is safe." While he stood reading the words, the maiden in white raiment came out and took him by the hand and led him into the cottage, saying, "My lord the king is welcome, but why is he here?" Then he replied, "I have been for 7 years traveling about the world, hoping to find my wife and child, but I have not yet succeeded. Can you help me?" "Sit down," said the angel, "and take something to eat and drink first." The king was so tired he gladly obeyed, for he really wanted rest. Then he laid himself down and slept, and the maiden in white raiment covered his face. Then she went into the inner chamber where the queen sat with her little son, whom she had named Pain-bringer, and said to her, "Go out together into the chamber. Your husband is come." The poor queen went out, filled with sorrow, for she remembered the cruel letters his mother had received, and knew not that he still loved her. Just as she entered the room, the covering fell off his face, and she told her little son to replace it. The boy went forward and laid the cloth gently over the face of the strange man. But the king heard the voice in his slumber, and moved his head so that the covering fell off again. "My child," said the queen, "cover the face of thy father." He looked at her in surprise and said, "How can I cover father's face, dear mother? I have no father in this world. You have taught me to pray to our Father, which art in heaven, and I thought my father was God. This strange man is not my father. I do not know him." When the king heard this, he started up and asked who they were. Then the queen said, "I am your wife, and this is your son." The king looked at her with surprise. "Your face and your voice are the same," he said, "but my wife has silver hands, and yours are natural." "My hands have mercifully been allowed to grow again," she replied. And, as he still doubted, the maiden in white entered the room carrying the silver hands which she showed to the king. Then he saw at once that this was indeed his dear lost wife and his own little son, and he embraced them full of joy, exclaiming, "Now has a heavy stone fallen from my heart." The maiden prepared a dinner for them, of which they all partook together. And after a kind farewell, the king started with his wife and child to return home to the castle, where his mother and all the household received them with great joy. A second marriage feast was prepared, and the happiness of their later days made amends for all they had suffered through the wicked demon who had caused them so much pain and trouble. The end. So what did you think of that story? How do you think it relates to our current situation and what we're going through? Yeah, it was weird. It's a Grimm fairy tale book. So you have a dad cutting off his daughter's hands as if it's no big deal, but they grew back. But how does this story speak to you and what we're going through right now? I'll tell you how it speaks to me. I think it's about choices. It's about choices and temptation. You have the father on one hand who is greedy, and he doesn't really appreciate what he has. He thinks the only thing he has is an apple tree, when he actually has a wife and a daughter as well. But he doesn't value them. They're not really significant. So he just mistakenly bargains them away for his greed. And then he works with the wizard on the wizard's behalf, taking away the water from his daughter so the daughter can't protect herself from the wizard. And then to save himself, he's afraid of for his own life. He then cuts off the hands of his daughter. That is capitulation. That is appeasement. That is what so many people for so long have been doing in regards to our authoritarian leader. That approach never works when it comes to these situations. But then you have another model. You have the girl herself, the daughter, who doesn't just go along with this. She doesn't say, well, I'm a dutiful daughter, so I'll just go with this wizard because you promised me away in this bargain. No, she's like, the heck with that. I'm not going. So she washes herself to make herself clean. And okay, that's weird. I don't like that, to make herself white. And I was like, the symbolism there, I don't like. But okay, she washes herself and she puts a chalk circle around herself and stands in the middle and just like, okay, you can't touch me. I'm not going anywhere. I refuse to go along with this situation. I refuse my father's authority. I refuse this evil wizard. I will not go along with it. No, she says no. And so her father sides with the evil wizard, takes away her water, but her crying protects her. Her emotions protect her. And then her father's like, hey, I'm going to be killed unless I cut off your hands. And so she goes along with it because she doesn't want to disobey her father. But her tears again save her. And then the father's like, hey, everything's good now, right? We're all good. The wizard's gone. And she's like, no, I'm out of here. This is not a safe place for me. I need to leave. I need to go to safety. So she leaves. So that's her agency. That's her saying no. That's her standing up for herself. So you have the dad who values his life so much that he works with this evil wizard against his daughter. But you have a daughter refusing. And then later, what about the king's mom? Right, the king's mom gets an order from the king, from her perspective, to kill the daughter and the child. And what does the mom do? Does the mom obey the order? No, she does not. And disobeying a direct order from a king, that's putting your life on the line. That's risking your own life. She knows that, and she disobeys anyway. She allows them to escape and get to safety. People risking their lives to help others, or people in fear for their own life capitulating, doing evil things and the bidding of an evil wizard. That's where we're at. This is our situation. This is the choice we have. If we act out of fear for our own well-being, fear for ourselves, we'll probably capitulate. But if we say no, that this is not okay, and we risk our own well-being to take a stand, then we will prevail. That's the lesson of this story. Everything eventually works out. Her hands grow back. It doesn't always work out for everyone. That's why people capitulate. And that's what authoritarians do. They isolate one at a time to make one capitulate or to punish that one person. But if we all stand together, if we stand united, like the EU did, like the people of Minneapolis did and are doing, then we will get through this. We will get through this together. We will get to the place that we want to be. Your action item for this week, and it's actually a 2-week action item. It's called the Noticing Nature Intervention. I'm getting this from a New York Times article. This is similar to the gratitude practice where you write down 3 things you're grateful for, but this is a little different. The challenge is to notice something about nature, to go into nature, to look at a houseplant or something, to observe it long enough, to be in nature long enough observing till you notice something and that you have a feeling about it. So it could be surprise, wonder, awe, disgust, feeling a connection, whatever that feeling is. And you can take a picture of that thing if you want, if that helps you. And then later, you write down in a journal a really quick, what did you notice and how did you feel? And do that every day for 14 days. And if you do that, they did a study. And in the study, they found that participants built a sense of, quote, transcendent connectedness, which is feeling connected to other people, to nature, and to life in general. A sense of elevation, which is profound feelings of gratitude, moral uplift, and being part of a greater whole. And a sense of hope agency, which is determination and confidence in pursuing goals. So your challenge, your homework assignment, your activity, your action item is to be in nature, go out in nature. It's really cold, I know. The first day I did this, I went out into my backyard and I had planted milkweed there, and the milkweed seed pod had ripened and cracked open, and there was all the little seeds with a little filament all ready to burst out of the seed pod. And it was a feeling of curiosity and wonder and awe and surprise. I didn't know that there was those seed pods in this location. And so it made me feel better. It made me feel more connected. So I'm curious if these things will, if you do this just once a day, and again, if you can't go outside, if you have a house plant, if you look out your window and notice a bird, or to notice something about nature until you have a feeling about it, and then write it down. Then see if you start to feel this transcendent connectedness, being more connected to other people and to nature, an expanded sense of elevation, which is profound feelings of gratitude or moral uplift, being part of a greater whole, and a sense of hope agency, which is more determination and confidence in what you're pursuing. And let me know how it goes. So that's the action item for today and the next 2 weeks. Until next time. Thanks for joining us on Resilience in Dark Times. Remember, building resilience isn't a solo project. It's something we do together. If this episode helped you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and visit resilienceInDarkTimes.com to join our community of people who refuse to give up. Until next time, stay strong, stay connected, and keep resisting.